Hello and welcome to another amazing part of What If Garp Changed the Future? Professional Ranter wrote this amazing story. Please support them. Don't forget to like, sub, and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. Garp observed as a small group of Kuja prepared the initial grounds for an outpost on the uninhabited island they were currently on. For islands had finally been decided upon to make outposts upon to better defend Amazon Lily, Hancock had selected each of them herself. For now, the Kuja were preparing tents and a place for them to live and store the materials they would be using to build the outposts, but given how well they all have been progressing in their training, Garp had no doubt they'd be able to finish the construction quickly. Sarah stood next to him, leaning against the railing with a content smile on her face. Her and the Kuja she had left with had returned the day before Garp and the crew were set to head out to meet with Dragon, and the weapons they had returned with showed plenty of promise in the hands of the Kuja. "So, how are you and Sandersonia doing?" He gave her a playful nudge with his elbow and Sarah's face exploded in a blush. It was obvious to everyone that she and Sandersonia had become a couple on their trip. "We're doing good, figuring out the whole long-distance thing, but we're making it work." "So, what did Tarani's letter say?" Sarah's had delivered the letter the slain rebellion leader had wanted sent to Garp the moment they had docked at Amazon Lily. But she hadn't pried into what it said until now, giving Garp some time to read it. It was a plea to free the South Blue from the Marines, Garp said somberly. If he had known about the rebellion within the South Blue, he would have done something, but as Dragon had told them when he had contacted them about the traitors, Kong had done his work to keep the information hidden. He said he had lost all hope that the Marines could ever be trusted again to protect them. He asked to give them a way to stand on their own without the aid of the Marines or the world government. "I've been talking to Hancock about an idea of sorts. I'll let you all know about it once we have a more concrete plan. With the idea I've got, we can't just simply wing it. It's actually the reason I had Hancock come with us so she could meet Dragon." Garp nodded his head over at Hancock, who was chopping trees with her kicks to help clear a bigger area for her Kuja. Kuzan sat below them, his back against a wall with Alvia sitting next to him. Dragon sounded worried about something. "Do you think Hancock has been compromised?" Garp shook his head. He would have said so if she was. "It's something else, and given the traitors and undercover Cypher Pole agents they discovered, it worries me that he was worried about something but didn't tell us. But you can ask him yourself, he's here." Garp jumped over the side of the Granting Wish and onto land. The others quickly got off the ship as well, except for Kuma, who was staying with Bonnie below deck. They could see the ship flying the Army's flag heading for them as it made landfall. Dragon hopped off alongside a young girl. He walked up to them with a chest held under his arm. "Where's Kuma?" he asked as he looked around, sparing a small glance for the nearby Kuja but keeping his eyes on his father. "And this is..." Garp gestured at Koala, only to then pull Dragon in for a quick hug. "Proud of you for handling that traitor situation without asking for our help. You did good coordinating your people and getting the information." Dragon averted his eyes, but the light blush on his cheeks gave away his true emotions. "This is Koala. She's one of the lower-ranking members of the Army, but with the recent holes that have appeared, she's slated for a promotion." Koala let out a tiny cheer and gave Garp a salute. "Nice to meet you, sir." Garp chuckled. "No need to salute me or call me sir, I'm not part of the Army." "It's nice to meet you, Koala." "Kuma's in the dining room with Bonnie." Garp gestured behind him at the ship. "And once you're done there, I want you to meet with Hancock. I've got an idea I think you might like." Dragon gave his father a tentative smile. "If it's coming from you, then it's sure to piss off the world government. But before that, I need to talk to Kuma about something and I want you there." Garp raised an eyebrow. "All right, now come on, let's go get Bonnie her devil fruit." He clapped Dragon on the back with a chuckle and walked back up the ramp onto his ship. Dragon walked next to him. "So I heard a ship of Marines decided to join the Army when you finally got to the Age fruit." "Yeah, we're keeping an eye on them right now given everything, but so far they've proven to be genuine in their intents to fight back against the world government and the Marines. They also said you trained all of them, talked about owing a debt to you." "Why did they owe you a debt?" Dragon asked. He didn't fully understand how his father had handled training new Marines, so he was curious. Garp shrugged. "No clue, haven't been told their names, so I don't know what I could have done for them. And I don't even know why they would consider themselves indebted to me." Before Dragon could ask one of the other former Marines of the crew, they arrived at the dining room where Kuma was sitting next to Bonnie, who was drawing something. "Kuma, it's good to see you." Dragon gave his friend a smile and lifted up the chest that held the Age fruit. Kuma smiled brightly at his friend. "Bonnie, Uncle Dragon is here," he whispered to his daughter, who ran up to Dragon with a bright smile and hugged him. "Uncle Dragon." She let out a laugh as Dragon returned the hug. Garp gave his son a small smile. He could see the sadness on Dragon's face. Garp knew why Dragon had given him Luffy to take care of. The love a parent can have for their child can cause them to give up things they once had the strongest conviction for, and Dragon couldn't give up on his cause. It had been the same for Garp back when Yumi had been alive. When they had found out she was pregnant, Garp made plans to buy a large merchant ship for them to live on where they could raise their child on it. Then Yumi went into labor early and the plans to buy the ship were abandoned. Garp had been ready to leave the Marines to raise his child with the love of his life, but the world took that away. It hurt him to know that Dragon was going through something similar. "Okay, Bonnie, this won't taste good, but it's going to help you." Dragon opened the chest and took out the hourglass-shaped fruit. He handed it over to Bonnie, who grabbed it and took a bite out of it. Immediately Bonnie made a face at the taste, but she still swallowed the bite. Garp chuckled. "All right, you don't need to eat anymore. Just needed to take a bite." He patted her head, then took the fruit from her hands and ate the rest of it. "Damn, these things still taste horrible." He walked over to the board and crossed off their goal of getting the age fruit. "You've eaten a devil fruit before?" Koala asked with a tilted head. "Yes," and he took a bite out of his fruit, then couldn't eat the rest. "Finished it up for him," Garp answered while he looked at the map. Dragon rolled his eyes. Garp had told him the story before. For a few days after that, some people thought Garp was going to develop devil fruit powers until they realized that it depended on who took the first bite. "Okay, Bonnie, I need to talk to Kuma for a bit. How about you go have some fun with the others and test out your new powers?" He gave her a small smile while he felt a pang in his heart that he couldn't have a moment like this with Luffy. Once Bonnie and rest of the crew were out of the room and somewhere they wouldn't hear the conversation, Garp sat down and gave his son his full attention. "Okay, Dragon, what did you find out that you couldn't tell us over a den?" Dragon gave Kuma a concerned look and hesitated to say anything. "When we found Holt's records, we found that Bikori had hired his services. Before that, though, we found out how he garnered a reliable reputation." "Dragon, did he try to sell out Sorbet?" Kuma asked. "No, he sold out Ginny's location to Kong," Dragon said, and he flinched back as he felt Kuma's anger right away. This had been what he was afraid was going to happen when he told Kuma. While Kuma was normally a very kind and relatively peaceful person, Ginny and Bonnie were two of the very few things that brought out the side of him that scared people more than when simply facing him in a fight. "What?" Kuma's voice was deeper, and his rage could be heard despite him only saying one word. "That's not all, is it?" Garp asked, keeping part of his attention on Dragon but keeping the rest on Kuma. He had no doubt that Kuma would do something irrational soon. After all, Garp would do the same with Yumi's murderer. Dragon took a deep breath. Bikori used Holtz to find out where Ginny's grave is, alongside another traitor about Bonnie. We have reason to believe they took Ginny's body from her grave. Garp sprung forward and grabbed Kuma as the buccaneer tried to run out of the dining room. Kuma, stop. Where is Bikori?" Kuma yelled out as he fought against Garp. "We have an idea, but we don't have the time right now to go after him," Dragon said. "You won't be, this is Kuma's fight," Garp told Dragon. "Now Kuma, just sit for a moment and let me say something before you think about running off." Kuma was panting, but he listened and sat back down. "I am not against you going on a solo mission and going after Bikori, but Bonnie needs you right now for training her new powers. Once she has the basics down, we'll send her somewhere safe with Alvia taking her there and you can go hunting. The crew has their own plans right now that we can coincide with that. Hide your real intentions and keep Bikori from hiding away. But I need you to be patient for just a few days, please." Kuma took a deep breath, but his anger would not dissipate. "I will wait until Bonnie can go to her safe haven, then I am going to find Bikori and give Ginny a new grave." Garp looked at Dragon for a moment, then back at Kuma. "I don't know if you'll need to give her a new grave." "Why?" Dragon asked while he put a comforting hand on Kuma's arm. Garp stepped away and let out a sigh. "Okay, this was only ever rumors among the Marines. I never saw anything that proved it, but supposedly the 5 elders possess a devil fruit known as the Rise fruit. Once eaten, the wielder can revive one person from the dead. After its use, the devil fruit leaves the person's body and transforms a nearby fruit into itself. Now supposedly, they would allow families that had done good in some way or met some sort of criteria to use this devil fruit to revive a slave that they liked. I wouldn't even be thinking it was true, but Sengoku once talked to me about how some of the slaves he's seen get killed he could have sworn he saw alive a few months later. He wasn't one to support baseless rumors, but even he wasn't certain. Whoever owned Ginny, be it Charlos or another Celestial, seems they used Bikori to get her body to revive her, if the rumors are true. We'll find that out by finding Bikori. Dragon, see if you can't help us figure out where Bikori has been sighted while we train Bonnie, then we'll send Kuma after him." Kuma was shaking. Dragon could feel it, but he only had eyes for his father. I'll see what I can do. If the rumors are true, we need to get that devil fruit away from them. Kuma hugged Bonnie to him tightly. You'll be safe with Alvia. Call me when you get to Fusha. He fought back his tears. He wouldn't be able to see her for a while, not until they found someone who could make a proper cure for her. I love you so much, my little jewel. Bonnie hugged him back just as tightly while she cried, I love you, Papa, she managed to say through her tears. Kuma let her go and she went over to Alvia, who reached her hand out for Bonnie to take. I'll keep her safe, Kuma, I promise, Alvia swore to her crewmate. Kuma gave her a grateful smile and watched as Alvia and Bonnie got on the ship and sailed off. He took a deep breath and he let out the emotions he had been bottling up. Where do I begin to hunt for Bikori? The crew stepped back slightly. It was truly terrifying seeing Kuma express bloodlust like this. Before we tell you, I'm gonna give you the plan to make sure Bikori doesn't get a chance to go into hiding, Garp said and gestured to the table at the Kuja camp that they had set a large map on. The crew, Dragon, and Hancock surrounded the table. Now, Dragon and Hancock will communicate with me as the rest of you go on your respective attacks. Saras, Gion, Kazan, Bogard, you four will be going on the attack after marine bases alongside Kuma. That'll hide his hunt for Bikori for as long as possible, and if you find any intel relating to Bikori, you'll report it to him. Meanwhile, the Granting Wish will go on the attack against marine patrols. Garp stepped to the side and Dragon took the spot. While the army is cleaning up the last dredges of the traitors, we have people on their way here to guide the four of you and help give you transportation. We'll be spreading out where you are attacking based off where Bikori was last reported to be seen here. Dragon grabbed a stick and pointed it at an island on the map. It's a marine outpost island, unnamed and at most used for resupplies. At least that's what is on the paper. In actuality, it's an outpost that helps to send out Cypher Pole agents on undercover missions, except for Cypher Pole 9 and Cypher Pole 0. Garp perked up at that and rubbed at his beard. I know the outpost that those two use for jump-offs for undercover missions. Do you think we'll need to attack them for this? Dragon chuckled. We really need to go over all the information you have on the Marines at some point. Right now, it's not a good idea to go after those two, but next time we will. Kuma will use his powers to send all of the files and intel there to a location where it will be collected and sifted through. The rest of you will take the intel you collect onto the army ships you'll be sailing on and will meet up with other ships to give them the intel to take it to where we'll be going through it all. Dragon pointed the stick towards a general area near a small group of islands. This is where Myhawk's Island is. There's a marine base there. Bogard, you'll be taking care of it so the army can use Myhawk's Island as a base. After that, you'll move on to the next target, which will be given to you once the job is done. Dragon offered the stick to Hancock, who pointed it towards two islands on the map. In preparations for when it is time for me to take my place as an emperor, we will be removing the two closest marine bases on the Paradise side of the Southcom belt. Gion, Saras, pick one of the two and take them down. After that, you'll be given further targets by Dragon. She threw the stick to Garp, who pointed it towards a spot near Water 7. At Tom's request, we'll be attacking a marine base near Water 7 that's known for using the unfairly increasing the protection tax that marine bases use to fund themselves. Kazan, that'll be your first target. A lot of the bases you'll be attacking reside on unnamed and uninhabited islands that are primarily used for resupplying marine ships. The loss of such bases will damage the hold the world government has on Paradise and lay the foundation for Hancock's territory. We'll be sticking primarily to Paradise, but there will be a few bases and some of the blues we'll go after. Tom, Belmir, Lamy, and I will be handling going after marine patrols as a minor distraction to help shield you guys, and in between attacks we'll help give you guys new intel that comes in and your next targets. Any questions? Are there any targets in East Blue? Kazan asked as he looked over the map. Two smaller maps had been placed along the sides where the comm belts are for East Blue and the South Blue. The Granting Wish will be going after them once Alvia reports in that Bonnie has been dropped off. Garp assured Kazan about Alvia's safety. Although we only have one critical target in South Blue that we have plans to attack, part of the goal here is to help shield Kuma's hunt for Bikori, so we'll be focusing on Paradise, but we've made sure to spread out the location of the targets. We won't be making any moves in New World. There are targets in the four blues that may get attacked depending on how far we get on this list. How big is the list? Gion spoke up as she looked over the map. Dragon gestured to the pile of papers on a nearby table. That's the list right there. Location and reason for targeting it. The pile of papers took up the entire table. Gion stared at the pile for a moment. So how do you decide what our next targets are? We'll give it based on the intel that we have when assigning it, Dragon said. Dad will be helping with that since he knows you all best. Aside from helping Kuma with his hunt, we're also trying to expose further corruption of the Marines and sabotage their operations. After Sorbet, they've been a mess and they're doing their best to try and restore what little of their balance that they can. Hancock told me about how Admiral Tsuru sent out letters to all warlords telling them their workload was about to increase tenfold, due in part to the mass loss of ships. In total, they lost 423 ships, and they haven't had a chance to replace them all. From our intel, we know a good number of the ships came from South Blue, but the rest came from Paradise and New World. Their patrols still have holes in them, so pirates and emperors have taken advantage of that and expanded their power. After this meeting, I will be setting out for Marine headquarters for a warlord meeting, Hancock piped in. While I can't give you any intel that comes from that, in order to not risk my current position, I will be volunteering to use my fleet of ships to patrol South Blue so that the Marines can focus on Paradise and New World, although I'll be using it to prepare for our endgame. Saris, do you have something I could give to your friend Green at Smith 18? If I can make allegiances with his connections when the time comes, then the Marines will fall even easier. Saris tilted her head slightly before her eyes widened. Wait, are you planning to make the South Blue your territory? It was Kuzan's idea and Garp supports it. Hancock shrugged her shoulders. I find that there are many benefits by taking it as my territory, chiefly the South Blue's weapons production. Saris smiled, glad that she was able to do something to help Mr. Green. Yeah, I'll go make the letter you can give him. She ran off to make the letter. Garp looked off to the horizon and saw 4 ships incoming. Before we end this meeting, I have one last thing to say. We are primarily attacking isolated Marine bases. If they are connected to a town, village, city, or kingdom, we'll be avoiding them if we can, but if they have intel we need and they're on the list, then you will be given permission to attack. When those assignments are given, your army partners will call in some soldiers to help with the attack and ensure civilians are out of harm's way. The ships docked and 4 people came off, although one of them headed for Dragon's ship instead of the group. Dragon stepped before them. Everyone, these are Hack, Inazuma, and Karasu. Koala, you'll be partnering with Gion for this. Koala stood straighter. Understood, I'll do my best. Dragon nodded at her. Hack, you're with Saras, Inazuma you will be with Bogart, and Karasu you're assigned to Kazan. They'll be doing most of the work. Your jobs are to collect the intel and bring it to the ships. If you have to fight, then do so, but otherwise stick to stealth. Each of them voiced their understanding. The 4 pairs went off to their respective ships and were soon sailing off, with Saras going last as she gave Hancock the letter. Once they were at a good distance, Kuma turned to Garp and Dragon. Give me the coordinates. Dragon gave his friend a nod. Here you go, my friend, and handed him a piece of paper. Coordinates for the locations we know he's been at, going from the latest to the oldest in Sorbet. Next to them are the coordinates you'll be sending the intel you collect. Keep your den on hand. We'll keep you up to date on anything we find regarding Bikori. Kuma looked over the paper. Inform me if I will have to interrogate him. Kuma took off his glove and turned himself slightly in place, then placed his palm against his chest and sent himself flying. He flew through the air in a bubble. In a half hour he crashed into the Marine base. We're under attack. A Marine yelled out as they ran around. Kuma stood up from his kneeling position and looked around. Run. He gave them the single-word warning, a courtesy he gave only so that he could quicken his search. A few of the Marines ran for the ships, but the majority stayed. I warned you. Utilizing his devil fruit, he made himself move rapidly around the base, sending Marines flying to a single location, where this all started. Quad Peak Island. In a few short minutes the base was empty, and Kuma made his way to the guest quarters. Looking in, he saw that they were empty. He looked at the guest book. Bikori had left 4 days ago for a revisit to one of the bases on the list. He grabbed the rest of the files within the base and packed them into supply crates he emptied. With a quick slap he sent them to the army. He took a deep breath, letting his bloodlust clam slightly. He had hoped that this would have been easier, that Bikori would have still been here. But he refused to stop. Bringing his hands together he began to form a sphere between them. It took the shape of a paw and began to glow. He pushed it towards the island. Before it hit, he launched himself into the air and was given the spectacle of his Ursus shock imploding, forever destabilizing the island. The Marines will never be able to use it as a base again. The island they had selected to meet on was close enough to the Marine base that it wouldn't take long to get there with the use of his fruit. The next island, however, would take a few hours to arrive, so Kuma occupied himself with a book. But he had trouble focusing on it. Thoughts of Ginny, revived and forced to go through slavery for a 3rd time, terrified and angered him beyond anything he'd ever felt before. The closest he could think of when he felt like this was when Bonnie had been taken hostage by the Marines. How could I have failed her again? With Saras? The ship Sarah's and Hack were on had been enhanced with tech inspired by blueprints from Germa that Tom had given to the army after Sorbet. It had granted them the ability to move faster. The way Tom explained how fast it made the sailing was that a trip that would take 24 hours with a normal ship will only take 12 hours. Tom's goal was to find a way to cut travel time in half so that the army could move faster. He had tested this technology out with the Shooting Star, the smaller ship of the Granting Wish. So, they were already closing in on Sarah's first target after only 2 hours. Sarah's looked at Hack for a second. Is there anything you'd prefer I avoid doing during my attack on the base? Just grant them some honor to fight. We do not know them or what they have done even if the base is on our target list. We should give a chance to defend themselves, they may even decide to join the army, Hack spoke calmly. I understand you used methods of stealth to take down the Marines of Smith 18. If you feel it is necessary to use such methods to take the base down, then I will not stop you. I know it is necessary to better protect oneself when deep in the heart of enemy territory, but fighters deserve to prove their honor. My methods were fear, Sarah's corrected Hack. I didn't hide myself exactly. I did kill some of them in their sleep, but I went for the ones who were so weak they targeted children, the elderly, and the disabled to abuse. I did it while it was dark, using my shadows to extinguish their lights. I then slit their throats and let their comrades wake up to them choking on their blood. They tried to attack me, I let them. I simply turned into shadows, unable to be damaged, but I could hurt them all. And I did. I slaughtered them all. They had a chance, or at least the illusion of one. Captain taught me the method of fear will lead to your enemies making more mistakes, and they did. They tripped over their furniture, the bodies of their comrades, even their own weapons. They were filled with such fear. She gave a smile to nothing. When the final group returned, I let their leader warn them before I took his life. Then I killed the final group of Marines. Hack didn't know how to respond to that. Well, at least you gave them a chance. He understood that he and Sarah's most likely had different philosophies regarding facing their opponents. It was something he had come to understand since joining the army. But to hear something so different, so terrifying, it was a shock. They could see the Marine base in the distance. I'll go ahead and begin the attack, Sarah said as she shifted the shadows around her into a pair of giant bat wings and she took to the sky. She had been training this technique since leaving Smith 18, in part so she could hover next to Sandersonia at the same height. She hovered high in the sky for a moment before jettisoning for the Marine base. She took aim with her Halkonen. Using her enhanced sight, she saw a Marine next to a large bell, most likely meant to use it to signal a warning of an attack. She fired twice. One shot hit the Marine, the other the bell. The bell cracked and shattered under her shot, but it rang out all the same. She tucked herself into her wings and began to spin in them, sharpening the point in front of her and turning herself into a drill. She altered her course and pierced through every ship that was docked at the base, eliminating any chance of an escape. She flew back up into the air and spread out into her wings. For the single moment she experienced weightlessness, she took aim and fired 3 times with her sniper rifle, taking down 3 of their own snipers. Once she began to fall, she turned upside down and took aim again and fired 5 more times, taking down the remaining snipers. Now they can't attack Hack. Letting her wings out, she caught a gust of wind and flew again, straight for where the Marines were gathering. She felt a feral smile grow on her face. She landed on the ground hard, bending her knees to lessen the impact before standing at her full height. So, who's first? Some of the Marines stepped back slightly out of fear, but others rushed forward with their swords drawn. Sarah's let out several of her shadow tendrils and tore off their heads. So, how many of you are going to run and how many of you are going to fight? It doesn't matter which you decide, your fate is sealed. Those of the Marines who had stepped back ran away alongside a few others who had grown terrified. Some went back so they could aim with their firearms while the others took position with their blades. Before their eyes, Sarah's melted into the shadows. Even her rifles disappeared with her. They looked around rapidly, trying to see where she would attack. Then at a single moment, several tendrils came out of the shadows and attacked those who held firearms, piercing through their hearts and heads. You cannot fight the shadows, they are everywhere. Her voice came from everywhere, all of the shadows. That broke the rest of the Marines and they ran. But massive shadow tendrils blocked the way to the docks. She had no intention of letting them swim away or to make a raft. Massive shadow hands destroyed the buildings, crushing the Marines beneath them. In the blink of an eye, the base was covered in shadow tendrils and hands, tearing apart the Marines. They fired their weapons, tried to stab and slash at them, but even those who lit their weapons on fire or waved lit candles at the shadows could do nothing against the shadow limbs. They killed all of the Marines in absolute slaughter. The tendrils retreated into the shadows and Sarah stepped out of them. Looking around she smiled, her eyes briefly shining red. You finished this rather fast, Hack observed as he looked over the devastation. The only buildings left standing held the intel they were after. Are these the results of Garp's training? Yeah, although I modified what he taught me to my skills, Sarah's answered as they walked towards the buildings holding the intel. She used tendrils to grab some crates that she had kept safe from destruction. I hope this doesn't complicate working together with me. Hack sighed. While I would like them to have the chance to show their honor, we are on a time crunch. And besides, he clenched his fist tightly in front of him, I will not let Bikori get a chance at hiding away from his punishment. To desecrate a grave is the height of dishonor, but to use the unjust occupation of a kingdom and a child taken hostage as a smokescreen for that is even more dishonorable. Sarah's nodded. On that we agree. They began to put the files and books away into the crates. Hack gave a look over the ship manifest that Sarah's had grabbed from the dockmaster's office. Is there anything interesting there? Sarah's asked. Nothing of note that I can see, but I'm certain the intel officers of the army will find something good among them, Hack said as he put them away into a crate. I'll communicate with Garp and see where we will attack next. We'll head for there once we give the intel to our drop-off ship. Sarah's nodded as she used her tendrils to lift the crates of files up and to the ship. Before we go, there's one last thing I have to do, she said as they placed the crates onto the deck of the ship. Hack raised an eyebrow as she walked back to the center and created the largest shadow tendril she could. Can't let them rebuild the base here. With a yell she sent the tendril flying deep into ground where it exploded out into several directions. The ground all over the island cracked open and exploded out as Sarah's destabilized the island. Hancock couldn't use either of the islands for bases of her own, so Sarah saw no need to let this island be used again by the Marines. With Alvia. Alvia gently rubbed Bonnie's back as the girl cried. While they had been sailing for a couple of hours, she already missed her father. Hey, why don't you show me what you can do with your devil fruit? I didn't get a chance to see your training with Kuma. She tried to get Bonnie to focus on something nice, something that would make her happy. Bonnie rubbed at her eyes and looked at Alvia. Maybe she doesn't feel up to it, Alvia thought. Can you tell me about sorbet? I've been meaning to ask Kuma, but we've been so busy lately I haven't gotten a chance. I'd love to learn about your and Kuma's home kingdom. Bonnie tilted her head. Well, Mr. Carlo had this big bookstore and he always let me read there while waiting for when Papa's letters would arrive. Then Miss Shinobu had really tasty ice cream in her shop that I would eat while talking to Papa over a den. She talked more about the many shops she would go to, especially on days when she would be in contact with Kuma. Alvia wrote everything she said down, with intent to ask Kuma for more details when she next saw him. They would remain like that for the next several hours, with Alvia only getting up, check, and adjust their course as necessary. With Guillaume. Guillaume leaned against the railing of the ship as they sneaked around the marine base's security. We're getting closer, keep a slow, steady pace. We should be able to dock soon. I'll disable their warning system, and while I handle their ships and the marine stationed here, you'll get the intel. Do you want to add anything to the plan? What about if they have any guests staying? Koala pointed out. The information they'd been given on the base they were attacking said that it had guest quarters. Take them into our custody and we'll figure out what to do with them later, Guillaume answered. The ship rocked a bit as they docked in the base's blind spot. Once you hear the fighting start, you can move into the base and begin collecting. Do your best to avoid having to fight. Guillaume gave Koala a pat on the head before jumping over the edge of the ship and made her way to the base. She climbed up the short wall and clung to the shadows. Looking around, she saw two bells with a marine next to each of them. Before she moved towards them, she saw the sniper high up on a tower. She made her way for the tower first. She placed her ear to the door to the tower and listened to see if anyone was behind it. When she didn't hear anything, she slowly opened the door and peered through. Once she saw there was no one within, she stood up straight and closed the door behind her. She unsheathed her blade and slowly made her way up the stairs to the top of the tower, keeping her ear out for any marine. Thankfully no one came and she came to the top of the tower. The sniper was leaning against the edge, their rifle not even in their hand. Guillaume rushed behind them and wrapped her free hand around their head, covering the sniper's mouth, and slit their throat. The sniper struggled slightly, but she held them down to the floor, away from the sight of any marine that might look up. Soon enough they bled out. Guillaume took a deep breath and listened for anyone running to the tower or running up the stairs. But all she heard was the sea and chatter of marines who had not realized they had an enemy among them. Looking over the edge of the tower while staying low, she observed the layout of the base better. It's compact, close together. Plenty of hiding spots I can use, and the patrols aren't looking for anyone hiding. The intel was right, they haven't been attacked since Hancock became a warlord. But to grow this complacent, they wouldn't be that trusting of a warlord to protect them. They might have something else. Giving one more look around one last time, she moved to the left and jumped over the edge. She fell for a moment before grabbing onto the edge of a sniper slit in the tower. Bracing her legs against the side of the tower, she jumped off it and fell for a second before landing on a nearby roof. Immediately she moved to a hiding spot nearby in a large clothes basket and listened for any incoming Marines. Once she was certain no one was coming, she left the clothes basket and moved across the rooftops to the first bell. Looking down at the bell, she saw the Marine was talking to two others. Yeah, she's apparently gonna be staying in the guests longer. HQ wants her here in case Hancock decides to go rogue like Mihawk. One of the Marines said. Well, I ain't complaining. But wasn't she supposed to head out for something? What happened to that mission? Another asked. The previous Marine shrugged. Don't know. Didn't even know what she was supposed to be doing. That's what I heard the Commodore talking about with her earlier. Guion jumped down and rushed forward. The Marine stationed at the bell noticed her too late. She cut all three Marines' heads off. She quickly surveyed her surroundings and saw no incoming Marines or heard the other bell ringing. She put Compira's point to the rope connecting the bell's clapper to the bell and severed it. It fell to the ground and she sheathed her blade. So, they do have someone here that makes them feel this safe being lazy. She climbed back up to the rooftops and made her way across them to the other bell. Looking over the edge there, she saw the Marine was alone, but he was talking to himself. Wonder if she'd be willing to step on me? Guion didn't want to hear any more of that and jumped down from the roof with Compira out. She landed onto the Marine's back and pierced the blade into the spot between his neck and shoulder. Her Mito blade went through several of his organs including his heart. She ripped her blade out and threw him to the ground and quickly cut the clapper off. Making her way back to the rooftops, she ran to the docks. Making way to their storage, she went in and looked around and saw the dock master inspecting the goods stored there, who she quickly dispatched. Looking for the sails, she found them quickly and slashed at them, ruining them. Looking out at the ship's dock, she saw only one that had its sails still. Looking around, she saw a few Marines patrolling the docks, and they seemed more alert than the ones in the base. She shifted across the dock from behind crates and piles of bags. She jumped onto the ship and quickly climbed up its mast and slashed at the sails. Once she was confident the sails were useless, she jumped down and walked onto the dock and snuck up behind a Marine and stabbed her through the chest while covering her mouth. Kicking her into the water, making sure it would make a loud splash, Guion hid way once more after flicking the blood off her blade and onto the dock. A few of the patrolling Marines came to investigate. Before they could yell out about the blood, Guion jumped out and cut off 3 heads of the 4 Marines and then thrust her blade into the 4th Marine's throat before they had a chance to scream. Pushing the Marine off her blade, she began to walk calmly back to the base. Now that she had the information she needed and had crippled their ability to run away. With the disablement of the bells, she had ensured that it would be difficult for the Marines at the beginning of her fight against them to locate her location, and with the removal of the only sniper they had watching over them, that removed their ability to keep a suppressing fire on her from a location difficult for her to reach. All of this had been techniques of disablement and engagement that Tsuru had taught her. Create chaos amongst their ranks before attacking and victory is all the closer. The 2 remaining Marines patrolling the docks yelled at her and ran at her, and she kicked one underneath the chin while disemboweling the other Marine before cutting the one she just kicked in half. Taking a deep breath, she walked back into the base from the dock and made her way to the first patrol she saw. One of them recognized her, and why wouldn't they? A Marine of her ranking deserting her post the way that Tsuru had set up would be talked about. The Marines yelled out and rushed at her. She held up her blade and stopped the one coming down on her, and then her slaughter began. Her fight at Sorbet had led to refinement of her skills. Facing against trained Marines instead of inexperienced or ill-equipped pirates was different, especially since she was fighting to the death against them instead of sparring with them. Her skills that had raised her up within the ranks of the Marines that allowed her to take down all sorts of pirates, she had found how to turn them against them. And that was shown far better here than in Sorbet, where she learned how to. Here she was able to cut down the Marines with ease. Block, slash, kick, stab, repeat as needed. By the time the Marines realized something was wrong, she had cut down a quarter of those attacking her. What the hell is going on? Where's our sniper fire? Why aren't the bells going off? They yelled out, and their loss of attention to the battle at hand cost them their life. Guion's focus had become singular: kill all the Marines in her way. Sparks flew from locking blades, her force causing some of them to break before Compira. The swath of blood went through the base to the center where she cut down the final Marine. She panted. She had painted nearly all of the floors of the base in the blood of the Marines. She looked around, seeing if anyone came out to attack her. She didn't hear anything, so she stretched out her observation hockey and sensed Koala coming down one of the corridors with someone else. She must have found someone in the guest dash. Before she could finish her thought, she realized she hadn't seen or heard any sign of the woman the Marines had been talking about. Koala? Just as she got ready to run for the corridor Koala was coming down, Koala came out, with a woman pointing a gun at her. A slim woman with light hair was holding that gun and wore a uniform that Gion recognized from Tsuru's rants about them. A black skirt and jacket with a white shirt beneath, the typical uniform of most Cypher Pols except Zero. Cypher Pol? The clothes match how Tsuru would describe them, but is it? Sheath your blade or I'll fire, the woman commanded, poking Koala with the gun. Gion got ready to do so when she noticed Koala glaring, and in the blink of an eye she had ducked to the right under the woman's arm and to the side and kicked upwards, knocking the gun out of the woman's hand. The woman pointed her index finger out and rushed it at Koala, but Gion had rushed forward and blocked the attack with her blade. Sparks flew from where the finger hit the blade and pushed Gion back. Koala, she spoke to her partner, go collect the intel, I'll be with you soon. But dash. Koala, listen to what I'm telling you. Go to your job and I'll do mine. Gion cut off any of Koala's objections before she could voice them. Koala opened her mouth to try an object again, but she saw the way Gion was gripping her sword. She stepped away and ran off. That won't save her, you know, the agent told Gion. Shut up. Gion rushed forward and brought her blade over her head and brought it down at the agent, but she jumped backwards and then began to jump on the very air. She tried to make distance with Gion and raised her leg up to kick, but Gion had ran after her and slashed at her from the side. The agent moved her leg away from kicking to block the blade. While her skin didn't become covered in hockey, the blade bounced off the skin like it was iron. She shot out her hand with the index pointed out, but Gion deflected it. The agent then shot out her other hand, but Gion pushed it away with her armored forearm. You think you can win against me? I'm the best agent of CP8. Me Alpha. Alpha's inferiority complex began to kick in as she was reminded of her spars against her sister. Taking down such a high-ranking deserter like you will let me move on to CP9. She kicked forward and an arc of light came rushing at Gion, who swung at it and held it back for a few moments before deflecting it to the side and sending it into the wall where it created a massive crack. She panted slightly. That technique always took a lot out of her, unfortunately, and Gion took advantage of that. Rushing forward, she brought her blade down and Alpha brought her arms up to block the attack with her iron skin, but Gion covered her blade in armament hockey. It hit Alpha's arms and she was able to resist the attack for a moment, but then the blade began to cut into her flesh. The slight pain and the massive shock of her iron skin being bypassed caused her concentration to slip for just a moment, but that was all Gion needed. Her blade cut through Alpha's arms and her throat, severing her head from her body. No, this can't be happening. I'm supposed to surpass Califia. This can't dash. But it is. Death spoke to her for the moment where everything froze and lost color. Where Alpha was in her own tiny little world where time stretched on for an eternity, you devoted so much to being better than your sister you never sought to better yourself in ways that your sister couldn't. You tried to be like her so much that it doomed you to this failure. If it wasn't Gion, it would have been something else. The path you chose and stubbornly kept to would always lead you to failure. Rest for now, Alpha. Your soul shall be punished, then you will enter into reincarnation. Perhaps in your next life you will succeed in your goal where you could not in this one. Gion blinked for a moment as she looked at where Alpha's head was. For a moment it looked like a woman in a suit was kneeling before it, but then Gion blinked and she was gone. Koala. Her focus immediately turned to her ally and ran for her. She skids on the floor as she turned a corner and almost ran into Koala, who was running for her. Gion. Koala yelled out as she grabbed at her. Are you okay? Yes, I'm fine. I played it safe and fast. What about you? Did she do anything to you? Gion looked over Koala. She let out a sigh of relief when she saw that Koala was fine. We're lucky we ran into someone from CP8 instead of 9. They are far more ruthless. Come on, I heard she was set up in the guest quarters. We need to see if she kept any files. We need to know why she was stationed here. There was no intel that said this base used as a Cypher Pol staging ground. It had to be something important. Gion had reason to believe that this base wasn't used by the Cypher Pols given the attitude of the Marines. Because a base that was used as a staging ground wouldn't let their Marines grow lazy with an agent around them. Walking to the guest quarters, they entered to see some personal belongings, but it looked largely unused. Was she staying somewhere else? Koala asked as they looked around. Marine bases typically had 2 guest quarters, the group and singular. They had assumed Alpha was only using the singular guest quarters, but now they weren't certain. Do you think she burned the files? I don't know. From what it sounded like she only got new orders recently. Guion opened the drawers of the desk, but they were all empty. We need to determine if she still had her files before we can leave. She wouldn't file it with the base's stuff, so it has to be somewhere secure for her. Guion looked under the bed while Koala opened the trunk. Sifting through the clothes, Koala looked at either side of the trunk and it felt smaller than it looked. Guion, could you look at the trunk? Something feels wrong with it. Guion stood up and felt along the lining of the trunk. Suru told me how for retrieval undercover missions she would use a hidden compartment in a trunk. Maybe Alpha was supposed to retrieve something and transport it with the trunk. She found a latch in the lining and pulled, and the hidden compartment opened and revealed the files. Go look over these and keep an ear out in case there's anyone we missed. Guion began to feel along the lining on the other side of the trunk while Koala looked through the files. It's saying she was supposed to head for Sorbet. Seems you guys reacted faster than they expected. What was she supposed to do at Sorbet that they would send a Cypher Pole agent instead of having the Admiral or Fleet Admiral or even CP0 agents handle it? Guion raised the question as she determined the trunk only had one hidden compartment. Bonnie, Koala answered in horror. A celestial dragon wanted Bonnie for them to use. Guion's eyes widened as she looked over Koala's shoulder to read the files herself. Kuma isn't going to like this. Does it say who sent her? Now it was clear. They were sending a CP8 agent for retrieval while having the 5 high-ranking individuals stay to fight the crew. Saturn, the elder Saturn wanted her. Koala could feel herself shaking slightly as memories of her time as a slave came to the front of her mind. She took a deep breath and remembered the Sun Pirates and she felt herself calm. It gives us where Alpha was supposed to take Bonnie. Do we give this to Kuma? That's up to Dragon and Garp, Guion answered as she took the files. They quickly collected the base's intel and took it to the ship. Help me set up their explosives, Guion requested as she brought out a crate of dynamite from the storehouse. We'll take their ammo, gunpowder, anything that can blow up and set it around the base. Koala joined her and soon enough they were rolling out a line to the entrance. Koala began to take the ship out of the docks as Guion lit a match and then the fuse. She quickly ran onto the ship, and they sailed away to a safe distance as the first explosion went off. More quickly went off and in a few seconds the base was completely destroyed, leaving behind a blazing inferno. Come on, we need to report what we found. With Kuma. Kuma landed at his target, the bubble he was within crashing through a building, and he stood up through the smoke. To the Marines all they could see was a giant bear. Who received Bikori? Kuma's voice sent fear's cold embrace through all who heard it. Answer me. I did. A Marine stepped forward, his coat denoting him as a captain. My ship brought him here, but he left on another. Look, my men and we want nothing to do with anything going on. This is supposed to be our final job before our resignations go through. Please take me and let my men go. Identify your crew and bring them forth. The captain looked back and gestured for his men to step out of the crowd. They tentatively stepped forward and stood behind their captain. In the blink of an eye Kuma had hit them with his hand and sent them flying, except unlike with the Marines at the last base Kuma put them in a protective bubble. What did you do to them? The captain yelled out as he unsheathed his sword and pointed it at Kuma. They're alive. Now tell me why Bikori returned to this base and where he went. The captain felt his legs shake. He left with a coffin he collected from here. I don't know where he went. I don't know anything else, I just saw him having the coffin loaded onto the ship he left on. You have to believe me. Now tell me where you sent my crew. You can join them. Kuma said as he hit the captain and sent him flying away in a bubble. He sent him alongside his crew to where he was sending the intel he collected. He would call ahead to inform the army. Now did Bikori bring the coffin here or was it delivered? None of the Marines answered. Kuma hit the air with his paw and the ships in the dock were struck, destroying the dock and the ships. The Marines watched as their only escape sank. It was delivered. A Marine yelled out, it was delivered 2 days after he left. From where? A Marine base close by. The same Marine yelled out. He rushed forward and fell to his knees before Kuma, panting and scared out of his mind. Kuma put the list of coordinates he had been given into the Marine's face. That one, it came from there. The Marine shakily pointed at the base that Bikori had been sighted at before coming to this one. Kuma sent the Marine to safety while he looked at the other gathered Marines who had taken out their weapons. We'll deal with those cowards later. The commander of the base stepped forward, blade drawn and gun pointed at Kuma. They had found their senses after the surprise crash into the base. For now we'll deal with you. Kuma glared down at them and moved himself around the base and sent them all flying without granting them a protective bubble, quickly doing the same for the intel. He took a deep breath in, but his body was shaking in rage. That coffin, it could be Ginny's, but it could be someone else's that Bikori took. It was maddening, the thought of Ginny's body being desecrated. The ring of his den brought him out of his thoughts. Kuma here. Kuma, Gion and Koala found something. Saturn of the Five Elders had plans to take Bonnie before we attacked Sorbet. Garp got right to the point. The agent from CP8 is dead, they're trying to see where they were planning to take her. We don't know yet, but we've already warned Alvia and she's on the lookout. Just be aware in case you face off against any Cypherpole agents, they could have something. I gotta go pick out Sarah's and Gion's next targets, call in case you need anything. Garp hung up and Kuma stood there for several moments. His thoughts turned to Bonnie, enslaved and used like he and Ginny had been. A celestial forcing her to carry their child, not caring if it would kill her. Whips, he saw the whips they would use against her. His haki responded to his rage and enveloped around him for a moment, almost like Conqueror's haki but something else. With a roar of rage, he slammed his palms into the ground of the island. He created a massive explosion on the island and sent himself flying into the air before he hit himself and sent himself flying for the nearby marine base that the coffin had come from. With a loud roar he crashed into the base. Who handled Bikori? He yelled out, slapping the air and sinking the ships. Answer me. The Marines were trembling. This was an attack they were not ready for, the attack of an enraged father. And in no one. He just left a coffin and some Marines and left. None of us were allowed to go anywhere near it. Please, you have to believe us. Several of them shouted out, begging for mercy. Kuma's arms shook, his whole body shook. He wanted blood, he wanted answers, he wanted Bikori's head. You will face judgment for your crimes. I know what you have done at this base. The extortion, the murder. You will get no mercy from me. Kuma's eyes glared red down at them. Some of them would swear to their soon dying breath it looked like smoke was coming out of his mouth. Kuma dispatched them all, but it brought him no peace. He stood in the base shaking from his rage. An aura surrounded his body, unseen to him but seen by the goddess watching over him. Is that? Death's eyes widened in shock as she saw the spectral form appear around Kuma of one of the Pantheon's old allies during the War of the Divine. The nymph daughter of King Lycaon, a huntress of Artemis tricked into sleeping with Zeus who had taken the form of her lady Artemis. Only for Artemis to turn her into a bear when she discovered she was pregnant to appease Hera. Almost killed by her child until she was sent to the stars as the great Ursa Major constellation. When the War of the Divine first began, Odin had forced the constellations back to life so that their power could be stolen. War had saved her, and she became their ally, and she was one of the many who died when they had gone after Shiva, whom had been corrupted from the unholy destruction of the war. I can't believe it. Her soul really did enter reincarnation. I'd recognize her rage anywhere. Death smiled in great joy at seeing the current incarnation of one of her oldest friends. This mission is bringing such interesting things forward. Kuma tried to keep his rage in check, but the thought of Bonnie branded, in chains, made into some celestial's property, it made him lose any sense of himself except for his need to protect Bonnie and save Ginny. He controlled himself enough to collect the intel, and the moment it was sent away he destroyed the island and sent himself off to the next base on his list. I will tear him limb from limb. With Bogard. Bogard performed the final touches of maintenance on his blades as the ship came up on the base. Has there been any word on the others' targets? He asked as he sheathed both of his blades and stood up. Inazuma nodded. Sarah's and Gion got their targets. And it appears that Kuma has taken down one of them at least, but I haven't heard anything else. She said as he guided the ship so its side was pointed towards the base. What is your plan of attack? Probably the same as the others, disable their ability to escape, work from there, get the intel, destroy the base. Bogard shrugged. Is Mihawk expected to come here and help set up the base? Yes, he'll be needed to teach us the lays of the land. Do you wish to see him? Inazuma asked teasingly. It would be nice to see how he's doing with the army, Bogard responded as he stretched his wings out. I'll try and keep part of the dock intact for the ship to go to. He took to the air and with a burst of flame launched himself at the base. Once he was within range, he unsheathed his katana, and as he did so he sent out an arch of flame that tore through the dock. Any ships that managed to not get hit by the initial attack were soon set alight and burned brightly as base's alarms went off. Unsheathing his shoto, he spun in the air and sent out arcs of flame at the snipers taking aim at him. He then flew down to the ground, landed with a soft step, and looked around as the Marines scrambled to collect themselves and attack. With a flap of his wings he flew through the base, slicing the Marines apart with ease. He moved like a living flame, wild and unpredictable. He moved from randomly across the base, not letting the Marines gather in one spot in large groups. In less than 10 minutes he had killed all of the Marines. Sheathing his blades, he held out his hands and summoned all of the flames to them, forming orbs of fire within his hands. I'll move quickly. From the amount of ships, they might have been preparing to abandon the base so as to not lose anything to Mihawk, Inazuma said as he ran past Bogard. Just as it had been suspected, all of their files had been packed away into crates. Moving them to the ship quickly, Inazuma gave Bogard a thumbs up as she moved the ship away from the base. Okay, let's see how this goes, Bogard muttered to himself as he flew above the base. He put both of the orbs together and then began to manipulate the flames to take shape, creating a bow and arrow from them. Pulling the flame arrow back, he pointed it down at the base and fired. As the end of the arrow passed the bow, the flames of the bow moved after the arrow, and it hit the base and created an explosion and then a pillar of flame. Bogard looked upon the pillar with a smile. Not as accurate as I used to be able to do, but I still got it. With Ivankov. Ivankov observed as members of the army dug through the intel that had been sent to them by Kuma. He could see the first set of drop-off ships on the horizon. Anything on Bikori? He asked Betty, gripping his hands into fists at the mere thought of the former king. Nothing major yet, but once we get our hands on that cipher pole files we might have another target for Kuma, Betty responded from the communications array. Ivankov, do you think Saturn is the one who gave Ginny her disease? I mean, we know whoever did is Bonnie's biological father. Why else would he be asking for her? Ivankov grimaced. The thought had crossed his mind. However, their intel about St. Rose Ward or his son Charlos owning him was far more reliable. Perhaps, we know the elders hold some authority over the Celestials, but why would he care about Bonnie? Because Ginny escaped. Betty hesitated to continue for a moment. We know Saturn is the head of science among the elders. What if he was experimenting on Ginny and that's how she got the disease and became pregnant? We say nothing of the sort to Kuma unless we have explicit proof, Dragon said as he walked out of the command tent they had set up. We can't rely on what-ifs right now to guide us, but your points do have some merit, Betty. We'll figure out why Saturn wants Bonnie later. For now we work on gathering intel and making plans of attack. 2 hours later, with Kazan. Kazan looked at the setting sun and sighed. Alvia is fine, she just has some bandages right now, she's almost fully healed. The base is within sight. What's the plan of attack? Karasu asked. It's within sight of Water 7 and we will risk Marines who are there coming here to help their comrades. We'll wait a bit longer until the sun is fully set, then I'll disable the base's lighthouse. Water 7 has enough set up to be able to guide ships and no one will notice one light missing among the rest. Then we move in and take care of the Marines, collect the intel, then I'll destroy the base. Kazan explained his plan to the commander. Makes sense. I would rather be helping make sure all the traitors are routed, but with the loss of manpower we suffered getting this intel and weakening the Marines like this should help to even the playing field slightly. Karasa leaned against the railing and observed his surroundings, keeping an eye out for any incoming Marine ships. It's frustrating to discover that so many people we trusted so readily sold out our cause. The feeling is similar to mine regarding the Marines. People were just willing to look away, ignore, or even aid in atrocities. I'm ashamed to admit I helped in the destruction of O'Hara, and that I'm guilty of the others as well. I want to make up for not doing something sooner, but I don't think I will ever be able to, Kazan admitted. So many people, I don't regret leaving the Marines. Like Garp said, I have other regrets, but they are all from my time within the Marines and not leaving sooner. I had a friend, Saul, he was a giant and part of the Marines. He abandoned everything to try and save Alvia and O'Hara. He was a far better person than me. Things haven't reached the point where it was too late to have a change of heart. Karasu nudged his shoulder. You're doing something now that's better than doing nothing at all. Kazan huffed out a cold breath. Maybe still feels like I did this too late. Sun will be down soon, let's get ready. Kazan slowly stepped over the side of the ship and froze the ocean as his foot touched the water and began to walk across the ocean to the Marine base. As the light of the sun faded, Kazan came closer to the base. The moment the sun sunk below the horizon and in the few moments before the Marines stationed at the base could turn on the lighthouse's light, he created a massive spike of ice that pierced through the top of the lighthouse. Several lines of ice moved away from Kazan's feet and created spikes that pierced through the ships docked at the base. Kazan continued his slow walk to the base, the dock closing in as the Marines ran around in a panic, trying to figure out what was going on. He sent out several more spikes of ice that pierced through the lights that illuminated the dock, sending it into darkness that was briefly lit by some of the other lighthouse's distant lights. They didn't give enough light to see anything that could help them. Stepping up onto the dock, Kazan sent out a sheet of ice towards the entrance to the base and froze the gates solid while sending out spikes to impale the Marines at the docks. Walking up to the frozen gates, Kazan placed his hand against it and sent out a small thin sheet of ice through it and shattered the gate. Walking over the shattered gate, he sent out lines of ice that destroyed the lights before any Marines could see anything that would help them. All they could see was the cold breaths that came out of them, and the shape of the man that was attacking them. They could hear everything though, and it scared them. The shifting of the ice as it crawled across the ceiling destroying the lights, the ice reaching out from the walls to impale them, and the ice trapping their feet to the floor stopping them from being able to run. They were surrounded from every angle by ice with nowhere to run. One of the Marines aimed his gun at Kazan and pulled the trigger, but it couldn't fire. It was so cold the pistol wasn't able to ignite the gunpowder within to fire the bullet. That was the moment they lost all hope, but they weren't given a chance to do anything about as Kazan froze them solid. Walking past the frozen Marine statues, Kazan walked further into the base and looked around, seeing the Marines shivering in place as they tried to surround him. Unfortunately for them, his ice had gone ahead of them and frozen the ground they walked on, impaling several of them. While YUW won't TT winning in, the captain tried to have control over the situation, but he was stuck to the ground and ice was creeping up his legs. Believe what you want, it doesn't change what's going to happen to you, Kazan spoke softly, yet he was easily heard by them. Ice spikes impaled the rest of the Marines and Kazan stretched out his observation hockey to cover the base, sending out lines of ice to the few remaining Marines that were hiding, killing them. You good, Karasu? Karasu came up behind Kazan and looked around at the Marines frozen in place, impaled and forced to remain standing up. I'm glad I grabbed a winter coat before we fully set out. Is it always this easy for you? Depends on my opponents, and besides, I was an admiral before leaving the Marines. You don't just reach that position on pure power alone. Kazan shrugged his shoulders as he followed behind Karasu towards the file room. What are the requirements for becoming an admiral? Karasu asked, mostly just making conversation as they got to work storing away the files. Part of it is having a lot of power. That's necessary since admirals are candidates for becoming fleet admiral. However, we're also required to have a mastery of at least one of the forms of hockey and to have taken down enough people with bounties that in total equal to at least 1 billion berries, Kazan explained. Those are the 3 minimum requirements to reach the rank of admiral, with other things being considered once it is decided a new admiral is needed. Before the crisis, the number of admirals there were was restricted to just 3, but that changed, so I don't know if any of the other requirements changed. Kureis closed the final crate and began lifting some of them to the ship with Kazan following close behind him carrying his own crates. I remember hearing Guillaume was an admiral candidate. Are the 3 initial requirements required to be made a candidate? Yup, which means the Marines often have way more admiral candidates than admirals, and I'm certain that's still the case even though they removed the limit on how many admirals there are. Kazan went back with Kureis to collect the remaining crates. I don't understand why they ever had that limit. I mean, in the army we have limited commanders because each of us is assigned to one of the Cs. That at least makes sense. Kureis shook his head as they put the last of the crates in the ship. Don't know. Kazan sent out a line of ice into the base and created a giant spike that destroyed it while also stabbing deep into the island. The ice should be melted by morning, let's go. As he stepped onto the boat, he made the spike impaled into the island create even more spikes, branching out until it was like an upside-down tree. They won't be able to use the island again. Good. Kureis guided the ship away from the destroyed base, that would only be discovered in the morning when someone would note that the lighthouse hadn't been on during the night. The next morning, Alabasta, the royal palace. King Nefertari Cobra rubbed his eyes in frustration as he read over the report on the recent pirate attack on one of the coastal towns of his kingdom. Thankfully, his investments in his army had paid off and they were able to stop the pirates with no civilian injuries or casualties. We need to get to the point where we don't even need to rely on Crocodile, but these constant attacks make that difficult. Water 7 still hasn't been able to build the ships I commissioned from them. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his forehead. Your Majesty, Shaka greeted as he entered Cobra's office. Princess Vivi has completed her aid mission to Nanohana and has returned. Would you like to see her? Cobra smiled as he stood up from his desk, grateful to take a break for a brief moment. Always. Besides, there's something I want to show her before she has to head out. Walking through the palace, Cobra observed as his people were hard at work trying to give aid to Alabasta, working them to the point that they would be able to stand on their own with the aid of anyone connected to the world government. Since secrets the world government had kept had come to light, Cobra had been one of the few rulers who remained on the precipice of leaving the world government. He hadn't, as he worked to try and change things, to make them how they were supposed to be, But that didn't mean he didn't make preparations to leave. Entering the throne room, he smiled at the sight of his daughter and Karu. "Father." Vivi ran up to him and hugged him tightly, and he returned it. "Vivi, it's good to see you. I'm glad you were able to help Nanohana, but I'm more grateful that you're safe. Come, I have something important to show you." Cobra gestured for Shaka to keep people out of the throne room, and then he guided Vivi towards the throne, with Karu following behind them. "Did something happen? What do you need to show me?" Vivi asked worriedly. Cobra stepped behind the throne and felt along the wall for a brief moment before he pressed one of the bricks and the hidden door opened. "We are currently stable, but anything could happen. I wanted to show this to you as my mother showed me when I had proven myself to care for our kingdom. You have gone above and beyond to prove that, so it is time to continue the tradition." The father and daughter walked into the hidden passage, leaving Karu behind in the throne room. "These drawings, what are they depicting?" Vivi asked as she looked at the paintings depicted on the walls of the passage. "A warrior who wielded the weapons of great heroes," Cobra repeated the words his mother had told him long ago, "who felled gods and monsters. One of their weapons came into our family's possession centuries ago by the founder of Alabasta, Nefertari Lily." The passage opened into a small chamber with a pedestal in the middle. "This is the Guandao of the Saint of War, Guan Yu." Vivi looked at the polearm impaled into the pedestal in awe. "So our ancestor used this weapon to found Alabasta?" "Yes, and it has remained within this pedestal since her death." Cobra smiled at Vivi, reminded so much of when he first saw this weapon. Vivi grew a determined expression. She wrapped her hands around the shaft of the polearm. "I promise to use this weapon to dash," she cut off as she tried to pull the weapon out only for it to not budge. Cobra let out a laugh. "I tried to do the same when I was first shown it. No one has ever been able to take it out. My mother told she believed that it's bound to Lily's soul and that only her reincarnation will be able to wield it." "Then why show it to me?" Vivi asked, confused on what the point of this was. "Because we don't need a great weapon like this to protect our people. Lily used her wits and intelligence to fight. The Guandao was merely a tool to help her use those effectively. We rulers of Alabasta have our true weapons and the weapons the people think are our weapons. One day you will find your true weapon, and the tool that you will use to conceal that weapon will be found soon after." Cobra placed his hand on Vivi's shoulder and smiled at her proudly. "I know you will be a far better ruler than me. You've shown those qualities at a far younger age than I did. I'm so proud of you, Vivi." He pulled her in for a hug. "I just hope that I'll be there to see you find that weapon and tool." With Alvia. Alvia woke up as the sun began to shine over the horizon. Getting up, she checked the navigation to make sure they were on the same path, and made a few minor adjustments. "Bonnie, it's time to get up." She gently shook Bonnie's shoulder. Bonnie sat up and rubbed her eyes sleepily. "Hi. Are we there yet?" she asked softly. After everything she told Alvia yesterday about Sorbet, she had grown very quiet since. "Not yet, but it's time to eat." Alvia offered Bonnie a plate of food that she had put together. "Would you like to write some letters for your dad that I can give him when I see him again?" Bonnie looked at her plate sadly as she slowly ate her food. "I want to talk to him." Alvia looked at her sadly. "I know, but we can't just yet. He's currently fighting to protect us as we sail to a safe place for you. Calling us could allow the Marines to track us down. And he's also currently pissed off like an angry bear. He doesn't want to scare you." "Okay, can I write a letter for him?" Bonnie accepted Alvia's explanation. It had been like that many times in the past. Alvia smiled at her. "Finish your breakfast first, then I'll go get you some paper." With Bogart. Inazuma watched on as Bogart and Mihawk exchanged blows while sipping on some wine. The moment they had destroyed the nearby Marine base, a small group of revolutionaries came in with Mihawk to set up their new base, and Bogart and Mihawk had decided to have a spar. "Although it's more like they are flirting than sparring," Inazuma muttered to herself. "Ma'am, your next assignment has just been sent over." An army member came over and gave Inazuma the coordinates and what is known about the base. "Thank you." Inazuma took the paper containing the information he needed to get to the base. "Bogart, we have our next assignment." Bogart and Mihawk stopped just before their blade would meet. "Well, shall we put this on hold until next time?" Bogart smiled at Mihawk. "Indeed. A shame we have to stop, but we have our duties. When next I see you, my dear rival, I will have shaken off the rust I accumulated before meeting you." Mihawk smiled at Bogart and sheathed Yoru. "A pleasureful night of sparring with you is certainly a good way to spend our time together." Bogart chuckled and shook his head. "Agreed. And next time I see you I will have regained my skill with my flame manipulation. I'll keep an eye on you in the media. I know you will be spectacular." "And I know the same for you." Mihawk walked with Bogart over to his rival's ship. Next we meet I will be victorious in our spar. We'll see, Bogard smirked at Mihawk. Although do you intend to let everyone see my mark on you? Bogard gestured at the upside-down cross scar that he had given Mihawk when they had fought at Sorbet. If they wish to face me they must reach your skill, this is a reminder to them of that. Mihawk shook Bogard's hand. Go and train Bogard, show them who you are. Right back at you Mihawk, show them who you truly are. We are on a schedule, you two can flirt later, Inazuma said as he got the ship going. With Dragon? Dragon looked over maps of the 6 seas, flags marking the bases they had attacked since they began. They had gotten 15 marine bases destroyed and intel collected from them, with Kuma having handled the majority. Where were they planning to take Bonnie? Dragon's eyes turned to a map hung on a board that showed a map of the area that contained the bases Bikori had been to. Bikori's movements don't make any sense. Why leave a coffin behind at one base to be delivered to the base he just left and then return to that base? While Ivankov and Betty were focusing on sending Sarah's, Kazan, Bogard, and Guion after their own targets, Dragon had taken the responsibility of giving Kuma targets. Unfortunately, they had run out of bases they knew Bikori had been at, and he had to give Kuma unrelated bases to go after. Dragon, you got some time? Belmir asked as she entered the tent. Garp and the remaining members of the crew had collected some intel from the marine ships they had attacked and stopped by to drop them off. Not much, what's wrong? Dragon turned to main maps table that he had been looking at earlier. Garp just wanted to know how you're doing. He's helping with restocking the ship so he couldn't check in himself. Belmir shrugged. What are you looking for? Where they were planning to take Bonnie and trying to decipher Bikori's movements. Dragon gestured at the maps in annoyance. He wanted answers of his own, especially because a member of the 5 elders was interested in Bonnie. Belmir looked at the map charting Bikori's movements. That looks like the half-elf movement. The what? Dragon asked incredulously, looking at the map again. The half-elf movement. It's a movement I created for marine ships to shake tails. You go to one base, then you go to another base, then return to that base, then go. Belmir picked up a flag and gently guided it along the map in a small arc until it landed on a base that Dragon hadn't even considered. It's supposed to look like the side profile of an elf from one of those fantasy books when you draw the route the ship took. Dragon, now armed with this knowledge, traced from the base Belmir marked to the next few bases. It looks like someone made it a full profile of an elf instead of a side profile. But why use this? My guess would be to ensure security because whoever Bikori is delivering to is important. Or someone is having Bikori constantly moving until they can pick up the coffin, Belmir suggested. With important deliveries for high-up nobles, or in this case a celestial or one of the elders, they typically don't like to have the package staying in one place. That could explain the weird movement with the coffin. Once the movement is completed around here, Belmir pointed to another base which completed the elf profile. Where would he be able to go from there? Furthermore, did he use the comm belt or another method to enter the Grand Line? I sent Kuma to attack the base target in South Blue for that reason. The intel hasn't arrived yet, but given the bases near that final destination in the movement, we could assume 3 bases he could go to next, one of which was one of Hancock's requested targets, the one Sarah's attacked. We moved her further away from the base for next few targets, so we didn't risk any suspicion being raised against Hancock, so we have Kuma's next targets now. Dragon sighed. He hoped they'd be able to find Bikori either at one of the bases or with the intel they get they'd find where he was now. What do you have about where they were going to try and take Bonnie? Belmir asked. Not much. All we did get on the location was one word and it doesn't make any sense. We've been trying to see what it could possibly mean, find whatever context we're missing, but we can't figure it out. Spring-heeled. Belmir rubbed her chin. Well, there was someone I used to have connections with that had the nickname Spring-heeled. Last I saw him he was a CP9 agent. He actually helped with O'Hara's destruction. Lasky was his name. I cut ties with him after O'Hara, so I can't offer you much. No, that's better than what we could come up with. I'll see if we can't figure out where Lasky might be. Thank you for the help. Dragon thanked Belmir. Oi, Bells, it's time head out. Garp entered the tent, then looked at the two standing near a map. So did she help you with figuring out Bikori like I thought she would? You knew? Belmir asked, surprised. Why did you ask me to check in on Dragon instead of helping him? You made several movements to help marine ships stay alive or shake any potential tails. I figured there was a chance they might use one of them. Garp shrugged. Dragon let out a loud laugh, used to his dad being like this. Besides, you always help people without needing to be asked. With Vegapunk and Music? Vegapunk paced nervously in his lab. Music sat on his desk in their mouse form and observed him. Why are you so nervous? It's just an inspection. But I have made several new devil fruits. They can even be fed to weapons without any trouble, unlike my previous attempts at artificial fruits and Caesar's attempts with Smile. Sentomaru's axe accepted the albino leopard fruit easily. What if they uncover you? What will happen? Vegapunk was scared. He'd been told one of the 5 elders was coming for the inspection, and if music was uncovered then both of them were in danger. I have a plan should that happen, do not worry. Should it happen, just play along. I've seen you finish the fake tech. Do you intend to make genuine technology to help you make more devil fruits? Music tilted their head and used their tail to scratch the back of their ear. Eventually, once I've made a few more, Vegapunk sighed. There wasn't anything he could do but trust in music. I've also been working on the automation, but there are some things that I will need to do, but my body's weaknesses make that difficult. Needing to eat and sleep, so many things that keep me from my research, I need to find a way to remove those. Music's mind turned to the satellites that Vegapunk created in the old timeline. I'm certain you'll figure out something to help with that. They'll be here soon. You've triple-checked everything you'll be showing for the inspection, including the devil fruits you'll be giving them to give to some of their marines, as well as Sentomaru showing off Shinra. You have everything you need to secure even more funds that will help you advance your research. You must calm yourself lest you make a mistake and end up hurting yourself in some way. Vegapunk heard a faint melody and found himself calming down. Thank you, Goddess Music. Vegapunk let out a weary sigh and rubbed his forehead. He looked at the door and stood straight with his hands behind his back, and a few moments later the door opened and Saint Saturn walked in. Elder Saint Saturn, it is my pleasure to welcome you to what is in the process of becoming my main lab. Discard the formalities of greetings. I am here for what you have found about devil fruits. Saturn ordered Vegapunk. What have you reached? Well, as you can see with these devil fruits here, I have managed to create near-exact copies of multiple Zoan-type devil fruits. Vegapunk gestured to the row of feline-type Zoan devil fruits. Currently they are of the feline variety of Zoans, but aside from the animals being of the albino variety of the animals, they grant the same sort of abilities the actual devil fruits give. As time, Sentomaru walked in with a large albino leopard walking next to him. It appeared to be a regular albino leopard except for the axe head at its tail. We tested out our first success by feeding it to Sentomaru's axe. It was a complete success. Shinra, as we have named her, is able to go through the 3 transformations with a regular albino leopard, the hybrid version, and weapon. With each version, Vegapunk listed off. Shinra transformed into it, with Sentomaru catching her when she transformed fully into an axe. Utilizing the same methods, we created 8 more, each one a feline animal, that we offer to you for use within the Marines. Saturn's eyes had gained a gleam to them. Perfect. This will give us an edge during this crisis. How long does it take you to make new devil fruits? Vegapunk gripped the sleeves of his coat briefly. Currently 10 days to be able to create 4 devil fruits, but I am refining my technique so it should quicken the pace. Saturn stroked his beard. What led you to this development? Vegapunk stalled for a moment, his mind blanking for a moment out of fear for music. That would be thanks to me, and as he had thought, music spoke up from the table they were resting on. Saturn's attention was completely on music now. A mouse that talks. Vegapunk, care to explain? Music jumped off the table and transformed before them into a dark-skinned, red-haired woman dressed with an outfit that exposed her midriff, a skirt made up from blue feathers and a few necklaces hanging from her neck. She wore fur-lined boots and stockings with garter belts. She had a skull painted over her face and a knife hanging from her hip. She took a sip from the bottle in her hand. The name's Maman Bridget. Saturn raised a brow. Interesting. How exactly did you help Vegapunk with his research into devil fruits? My devil fruit is the beat fruit. It lets me hear the melody of everything. She gave Saturn a smirk and took another swig from her bottle, while also allowing me to alter my physical appearance by changing my melody or to emit some melodies that have various effects. Why yes, Maman Bridget approached me after her crew was lost at sea and she washed up ashore. Vegapunk quickly put what he could. She had snuck into my lab while I was creating an artificial leopard devil fruit. She pointed out how the melody sounded wrong, and our partnership was born. I don't know much about science stuff, but I help him figure out how to put the melody right with the fruits and I get food and a roof over my head. Maman Bridget shrugged. I stuck to being a mouse because it made the agreement easier since he's still building the island. The gleam in Saturn's eyes grew brighter. Tell me what you did for your crew. I worked as security for them, telling them when someone's melody revealed them lying, protected them. You get the idea. They were simple merchants. I had the same agreement with them as I do with Vegapunk. Food, drink, and a roof to sleep under is enough for me. She leaned against the table and drank from her bottle as her body shifted and he cracked his neck. I'd rather he not get in trouble for hiding me, so here I am. How skilled of a fighter are you? Saturn looked from Vegapunk, who looked worriedly at Maman Bridget, to the mysterious transforming individual. The merchants operated exclusively in New World, and this sea has been my home since I was born, Bridget answered. You will take a seat among the warlords, and the world government will take on the responsibility of your agreement with Vegapunk. Vegapunk, you will continue to work with her. Bridget grimaced at Saturn and took a swig from his bottle, and will make more devil fruits for the Marines. You will be given the necessary funds, but we expect you to refine the technique. Vegapunk silently gulped. Understood, Elder Saint Saturn. There is a meeting of the warlords being held tomorrow. You will be there tomorrow, Saturn ordered Bridget. Fine, Bridget said. Once Saturn had left with the devil fruits, Vegapunk turned to Maman Bridget. Are you okay? She waved him off. I'm fine, I haven't used this form in a long time, so no one will recognize me. She looked at her hands as she transformed from female to male several times. I am both Maman Bridget and Baron Bridget. I haven't taken this on since I ascended to my eternity after the War of the Divine. We'll continue with our work once I get back from this meeting. And so Sky's plan proceeds. At Water 7, the dismantling yard. Icebug looked at the completed dismantling yard with pride. Frankie had already collected people that would work under him within the yard and had put them to work with helping build the yard. It looked amazing. You did a good job, Frankie, he said to his brother. Wasn't easy, but we can at least get started on the smaller ships while working on expanding our crew. Frankie smiled widely. We'll handle expanding the yard to accommodate for different sizes of ships. And we got homes set up nearby for us to live out of, so you don't need to worry about that. Khalifa looked at Frankie with a small amount of suspicion, but Icebug had told her how Frankie had worked on a ship that Tom had helped repair and how he knew his way around ships. It wasn't the first time Icebug had recruited people he had met during his time as an apprentice to Tom, so she had no reason to believe that he was a danger to her mission. Mayor, they'll to expand soon so we can be able to better focus on the contracts we've had to put on hold due to massive amount of ships we have to dismantle. We're working on it, but it takes time, Frankie assured her. We'll handle all the small ships. Hell, we might use some of the ships to help us expand the yard. Lots of good materials to pull from. Frankie smirked as ideas on how to expand the yard came to his mind. He was getting excited. That night with Garp. Garp sighed as he sat in the dining room of the ship. They'd been doing non-stop attacks on marine patrols, collecting the manifests of each ship while attacking near areas that were often dealing with pirate fleets, which meant they'd had to fight against some pirates. He was tired and they were finding a spot to lay anchor and rest for a bit before going back on the attack. Garp looked at the map on the wall. This is certainly progressing better than expected. What did you expect? Lami asked as she came into the room and sat next to Garp. For this to take a month? No, just us having to deal with an admiral or running into a warlord or something, Garp confessed. He gave her a pat on the head. You know, I was serious about you going with Alvia and Bonnie. You should have some sort of childhood. And I told you, Lami elbowed Garp, you're stuck with me, Gramps. You idiots wouldn't survive without a doctor. Garp ruffled her hair with a chuckle. You sound a lot like one of my grandkids. Look, once we're done with Hancock, we'll be going to New World, and that place is incredibly dangerous. I can handle it, and if you think it's dangerous, then you'll really need a doctor. Lami smirked at him confidently. Fine, Garp acquiesced. Tired? I'm used to staying up. So why did you pick out all those bases? Garp leaned back against the table. We're still looking for anything that might point us to where the production and storage of the ammunition for buster calls are. We just have a few targets with these targets, such as the vacation home of St. Roseward in Paradise, Bikori, recently where they were planning to take Bonnie, and as usual any celestial dragons to kill. I'm not used to the ship being this quiet, Lami muttered. It's weird. At most I hear Tom working on improving the engine. What's he working on? The engine he installed into the Shooting Star was the finalized version for an upgrade he was planning to make to the ship. Since he got it working, he's working on installing it on the ship so we can move faster, Garp explained. You know, he used to be a lot more sociable. Really? He usually only talks to Alvia, Lami exclaimed, surprised. Yeah, it was before he was taken prisoner by the world government. He couldn't stop talking about all the sorts of improvements he was working on coming up with for ships. Garp spoke somberly about who Tom used to be. Maybe he'll find that part of himself again, Lami said, although she didn't sound like she believed her words. Garp gave her a small smile and ruffled her hair again. Maybe? Now come on, you should get to sleep. He began walking her back to her room, but she held onto his clothes tightly. He let out a sigh and moved to his room and held her in the crux of his arm and sat down. Sleep well, Lami, sleep well. The next morning, with Alvia. Alvia had lowered the sails as she went to work on the engine, preparing it for what was coming next. "Are you strapped in, Bonnie?" she yelled out as she tied the sails tightly and lowered the mast to secure it. "Yes, Miss Alvia, what's happening?" Bonnie asked nervously, fearing they had to escape Marines. "We don't have Garp or any of the others here to help with fending off Sea Kings, so normally we'd have to go really slow through the comm belt to avoid attracting their attention. However, Tom built something into the engine that should allow us to get past the comm belt fast enough we wouldn't have to worry about the Sea Kings." Alvia tightened the dozens of ropes she had tied to the mast and began to strap herself in next to the engine. "Does anything look loose in there?" "No," Bonnie answered. "Should I hold on to something?" "If you want to, Tom told me how to properly secure people in for this, so you should be safe," Alvia assured her. She had woken up extra early in order to ensure everything was properly secured, especially Bonnie. Taking a deep breath, she fully secured herself next to the engine. 3. She placed her hand on the lever. 2. She put her other hand on the railing and held on tightly. 1. She pulled the lever. The ship rocketed forward at speeds she had never experienced on a ship before. The world around her blurred into nothing, her grip tightened and she grit her teeth as she counted in her head the seconds that passed. "Now." She pulled the lever up and the ship came to a stop. She wet her finger and stuck it above her, and for a moment she didn't feel any wind, but then it brushed past her. Tom's calculations were accurate. She smiled and quickly got herself out of her restraints and went in. While things were slightly jostled, there wasn't any visible damages. "Are we there yet?" Bonnie asked, eyes dizzy. Alvia got her out of her restraints. "Yeah, come on, let's eat now." She unpacked the food stores and made them a quick meal that they ate. "We won't be able to use the engine again for a while. Tom hasn't been able to make them still usable right after going at that speed, so we'll need to rely on the winds to get to our location for some time." Alvia smiled at Bonnie as she got up and began untying the mast and setting it back up. She looked over and saw Bonnie untying the sail from where it had been secured, using her fruit to age herself up slightly so her grip was stronger. They quickly had the mast and sails back up and they were on their way once again. Marine HQ, Warlord Meeting Room. Tsuru sighed as she rubbed her tired eyes. The meeting was being held early in the day and Tsuru had been forced to work overnight to check over everything she had to handle during the meeting. She had also heard that some Marine bases had ceased communications, as well as Garp's ship going after Marine patrols. She had a feeling that she was going to have even more work to handle soon. "I want to retire soon, but I need to find what I can for Belmir." They didn't have any plans to have her on reserve for a crisis like this, so they didn't keep what island she was retiring to on record. Trying to track down the people who handled her retirement has been a pain in the ass, just another flaw in the system. First as usual, Jinbi, how are you doing? No sign of Belmir in the Macro Pirates records either. Could it have been a fishman that was a fan of the Sun Pirates? As well as can be, Jinbi confessed as he took his seat. "Macro, what he did, I've been hard at work tracking down all he sold into slavery and freeing them, trying to return them home. I just can't understand why he would do this when he served under Fisher Tiger. Greed changes people, just like a drive for revenge or a need to always be right. Although that's Sengoku and Garp talking there, I think they just reveal who people truly are." Tsuru shrugged. "Perhaps, although both can be true," Jinbi hummed. "For some they hide themselves behind a mask until the mask is taken off by one of the vices, but for others such vices will change them as they become consumed by it. It seems though with Macro his greed changed him." "Yumi said that once," Tsuru muttered to herself, although given the largely quiet room Jinbi heard her. "She was Garp's wife. You might have heard of her during his fight with Sengoku." "Ah yes, I remember now," Jinbi nodded as the other warlords began to enter. Tsuru observed as each of them came in, waiting for a new one to come. She had been called yesterday that Elder Saturn had chosen someone to become a warlord, and while she couldn't veto the choice like with Kong's choices, she could do her best to ensure that whoever Saturn chose didn't hurt too many people. She picked at her ears as she heard some distant music, but it kept getting louder. In a loud melody a woman appeared on the table. Everyone got to their feet and ready to attack. "So this is how you greet new warlords? I guess I need to get used to it." Tsuru lowered her rifle. "You're Maman Bridget? Or Baron Bridget, it depends. I was told to be here, so am I given an assigned seat or is it first come first served?" She leaned down and looked at Tsuru with a smirk. "Just grab a chair, you're lucky you're not late." Tsuru grumbled and glared at the other warlords to stand down. Maman Bridget sauntered across the table to an empty chair and jumped into it. "Let's get this over with." Tsuru let out a frustrated sigh. "Doflamingo, you are to work to keep up the work you have been doing of stopping any pirates that enter into New World. Bullet, you will be receiving new targets to go after soon. It had been decided that Bullet will take care of some high-profile targets that were enemies of the world government, so he was given a list and just told to hunt them down. Jinbi, once you are done with your current mission, the mayor of Water 7 has requested your aid in a project he has. Krieg, continue your work against any pirate fleets within any of the Blues or Paradise. Foxy, Moria, Crocodile, there are no changes wanted besides reports if you take down any high-profile targets. Before she could get to her, Hancock spoke up. I will be patrolling the South Blue and handling any pirates within. Suru raised an eyebrow. Are you certain you can handle that? Since the crisis began, I have been creating more ships and training more Kuja to fight against any pirates that try to attack Amazon Lily or my ships. I have enough that I can handle patrolling the South Blue, and I won't let someone else choose what I do as a warlord, she spoke haughtily. Very well, Don Krieg, you won't have to do any work in South Blue then, and Bullet, you'll need to inform Hancock if any of your targets are within South Blue. Suru shuffled through her papers. Updates to the bounties of the Constellation crew are still being evaluated, but we have an updated bounty for Dracul Myhawk. It is 9 billion berries, and it is certain to increase as he is suspected to have joined the Revolutionary Army. Furthermore, there have been minor updates to bounties of members of the army. If there are any you have a vendetta against or have fought against or simply curious about, go check the bounty office and get a copy of their new poster. She got to the final paper and read over it quickly. Doflamingo, Temporary Admiral Kong would like to speak to you about what tactics you are using against the pirates that get to New World. Moria, Water 7 has put in a request that any ships you don't use to supplement your own ship to be sent to them in as undamaged a condition as possible. They have agreed to pay you 5,000 berries for every ship. But they can't be dinghies or merchant ships, they must be pirate ships. Any questions? Did Mayor Icebug say what he needed me for? Jinbi asked. No, just that he requires your aid with it. Although he spoke quite highly of you from your recent visit to them, so I expect you to maintain that image. Once Jinbi agreed to her request, she looked around, and once she was certain there were no more questions, she stood up. Then this meeting is adjourned. Collect what bounty posters you need and return to your assignments. Hancock will be moving some of the marine ships patrolling South Blue to Paradise. I hope that won't make things too difficult. You can take as many as you need. A Kuja ship is easily worth 10 marine ships, Hancock bragged. With Kuma. Kuma sat among the ruins of a destroyed marine base. He had attacked all the new targets that Dragon had given him, and yet he still hadn't found Bikori. He turned on his den and dialed Garp. It rang for a while before it was picked up. My next target. Kuma, we need some time to go through all the intel you've sent over. Take a break. Dragon is currently trying to find anything that tells us how Bikori got into Paradise before beginning the route he took. He's putting together a few targets right now, just give him a few hours. But if you want to go after a target, we have a guess as to the base they were going to take. Bonnie, Garp's voice spoke loudly through the den. It's a secret CP8 base we discovered. There's a direct line from the base Alpha was stationed at to it. We have no other evidence besides that, but from what we've deciphered, she was supposed to return to the base she was discovered at before heading out to drop off Bonnie at another location. Her orders were pretty bare bones, so it's been difficult to glean anything from it. If you do find Lasky at the base, be careful. He moves pretty fast and is considered a top member of CP9 despite his age. Kuma took a deep breath. I will report my findings. Garp gave him the coordinates for him to land and hung up. Standing up, Kuma took another deep breath. He needed to properly focus on where he was going to land to ensure he didn't end up in the water like he almost did with one of the bases he had attacked. Launching himself into the air by destabilizing the island, he sent himself flying through the sky towards his next location. He practiced his deep breathing, trying to keep his rage in check, to keep himself focused so that he didn't make a mistake that could be exploited. He had been on a rampage against the marine bases, trying to find anything he could that would lead him to Bikori, but as Garp had revealed to him, the speed at which he was gathering the intel was causing a delay in him getting new targets. In a few short hours he landed at the island. Looking around, it appeared uninhabited, but Kuma knew he had the right coordinates. Garp did say it was hidden. How would they hide it? Kuma took a deep breath and focused his observation hockey. Feeling around with it, he felt some presences nearby, but when he looked over where they were, all he found were some grazing sheep. Hang on, these sheep have been sheared recently. Someone would have to be here to maintain their fur. Looking around near the sheep, he noticed some broken branches on the ground, trampled leaves, and marks on the trees. But each of the trails led off in different directions. Those are fake. Kuma's eyes turned to where the sheep were grazing and moved to stand among them. He kneeled down and touched his hands to the ground and let out a small shot of air. He heard the distinct sound of metal being hit as the sheep were spooked away. I have you. Raising his fist up, he covered it in armament hockey and brought it thundering down onto the ground, hitting the metal. He hit it again and again and again, destroying the landscape around him. The metal bent and tore underneath his power, and soon it fell apart beneath him and he fell into a hangar. A marine ship was beneath him and he landed on it. The wood crumbled beneath his weight as he kneeled amongst the destruction. Standing at his full height, he looked around at the Marines, who looked at him in shock. Well, this is a surprise. A voice spoke up from one of the catwalks. Looking up, Kuma was met with a man in a suit with pale hair. Bartholomew Kuma, just how did you find this base? Lasky asked as he looked down on Kuma, a few Cypher Pole agents near him pointing their firearms at him. An agent named Alpha, do you know her? Kuma observed as Lasky's eyes widened slightly at the mention of the agent. Seems you do. Good. I have questions regarding what you were going to do to my daughter. Kuma's rage could be felt throughout the base. All those stationed there could only feel fear, except for the Cypher Pole agents. Your Conqueror's hockey won't do anything for you, we've been training to work through it, Lasky bragged as he and the other Cypher Pole agents jumped down from the catwalk. Kuma let out a growl. This isn't hockey. He slashed his hand through the air and sent a wave that felled the catwalk they had just jumped from. It fell to the ground behind them and kicked up a cloud. This is my rage. Kuma appeared before them and crushed the agents beneath his paws. Now, you will tell me where you were taking my daughter from here and where Bikori is? Kuma's eyes glinted red behind his glasses, and for the first time in his life Lasky felt fear. He hadn't felt fear since his training as a Cypher Pole agent. Even at O'Hara when he had been shot by Nico Alvia he hadn't felt fear. But this wasn't like anything he had faced. This was a wild animal, except he had faced those as well and he hadn't felt any fear when he faced them. This was something more, something older than the world itself. The vision of Kuma faded before his eyes and he saw a giant bear, but it was marked by stars like a constellation. This was a beast of the stars, what had existed before the Celestials and would exist long after they were all gone. Before something like this, all of Lasky's instincts commanded him to survive by any means necessary. We were supposed to take her with the coffin Bikori brought here to St. Rose Ward, BBB, but we redirected him. Where? The beast breathed on him. It was hot and felt like it was burning his skin. Nightcap. The island Nightcap. To a different base. Lasky screamed out, falling on his back and scurrying away, but the beast crushed his legs beneath an air blast. He let out a blood-curdling scream from the pain. Black Nightcap. It's Black Nightcap Island. Please forgive me. The bear crushed his left arm beneath another air blast. Lasky cursed his training as he let out another scream. Even with all this fear, his training as a Cypher Pole agent had him name a similarly named island instead of the actual island he had redirected Bikori to. Black Night Tempest Cap. He's there. That's where I sent Bikori. I swear that's the truth. I believe you. The bear spoke to him and crushed him beneath its paw. In the small eternity of his death, he saw a woman in a suit smiling widely as her hand reached out to him. Kuma stood up and looked around the base. He suspected this base was where they were outfitting their ships with the necessary cannons that could handle firing the ammo for buster calls, one of several. Kuma quickly sent the intel to the army, then launched himself to Black Night Tempest Cap, but he would have to wait some time to reach it. It was at least a days away, much to his ire. With Hancock, the Perfume Yuda docked itself near an empty island and extended its walkway down. Hancock walked onto the island and looked around. This is the island Garp told me to come to after the meeting. But where is the treasure he talked about? She stalked forward towards the small mound on the island. It was a small island, not even big enough for the Marines to consider putting a base on it or anything. Looking upon the mound, she moved the few rocks on it, but there was nothing. Of course it wouldn't be easy. When does Garp ever make anything easy? She was certainly grateful for the many dendens they had bought from Smith 18 since she had already commanded her Kuja to begin patrols within South Blue, because she didn't know how long she would be stuck looking here. Garp had told her that only she was allowed to look for the treasure. She couldn't get any help from her Kuja. Giving the mound a quick kick, she observed the greenery, the grass, the dirt itself, for anything that looked odd compared to the rest of the area. Nothing popped out to her. Garp wouldn't just simply send me to look for treasure that was buried unless... Could it be underwater? It puzzled her. Why send her to retrieve a treasure that was underwater when she couldn't swim? I wouldn't put it past him, but then, oh... She stood atop the mound and looked towards where she had just come from. He can be vindictive at times. This is the guide, not where the treasure actually is. She looked the opposite direction and saw another island that had several small mountains on it. She returned to her ship, to that island there. The ship unanchored and sailed to the island. Hancock didn't even wait for them to extend the walkway. She jumped off and onto the island and walked towards the clearing in between all the mountains. Looking around, she observed the boulders. Its closeness to Marine HQ would mean pirates wouldn't set up camp or anything here to avoid an ambush, while also meaning Marines wouldn't waste resources doing anything to them. Looking at the few other small islands nearby, Hancock smirked. The position of the boulders reflect the other islands, so this boulder here, Hancock kicked the boulder that was around the same position as the island Garp had sent her to. It shattered, and beneath it was a map. Picking it up, she opened it up. He was prepared to send someone on this journey. Just what exactly do you have hidden away, Garp? She returned to her ship and gave the map to the navigator. Take us to this island immediately. She sat back on her throne and petted Salome as they moved through the water, enjoying the wind that blew through. Her thoughts turned to the Great Serpent. I would love to talk to her again to understand just what Garp is trying to avoid happening in the old timeline. What must happen to ensure Amazon Lily's survival? I will not let what happened to me happen to any others. Hancock heard a voice yell out. She jolted slightly in her seat and looked around, but time still moved as normal. My island will survive. If you think I will not ensure that you pathetic wish, then I will strike you down. I am the adopted daughter of Jormungandr, the bane of battlefields. I am Medusa the Gorgon. I will not allow for my Kuja to be raped and cast aside like what Neptune did to me. I will not let them face unjust punishment like what Minerva did to me. You will listen to my orders. Is this a memory of the Great Serpents? Hancock thought to herself. Yes, my dear Empress. You asked to speak to me, but I cannot distract you from your task at hand, so I let you listen to my memory. If you wish to aid Garp in ensuring that the old timeline does not repeat, then follow your current path. Aid the army as necessary, protect your people, kill any celestial you find. You becoming an emperor of the sea is all that you must do to ensure the safety of our Kuja and avoid them experiencing what created me. Allow for Garp to handle this, trust in him. The Great Serpent spoke to her in her mind, assuring her of what she had to do to protect Amazon Lily. Thank you, Great Serpent, Hancock smiled to herself. Since learning of the old timeline, she had held doubts that what she was doing was enough to keep Amazon Lily and her Kuja safe, but to hear such assurances from the Great Serpent comforted her. For the next 2 hours the perfume Yuda sailed the sea and arrived at an island covered in trees. Jumping down, Hancock walked into the woods, observing everything around her, until she came upon a cave. This island is far removed from any routes that a ship would take, near completely untouched by anyone except for one person. Hancock touched the walls of the cave. He literally carved out this cave with his bare hands. Just how much worth does this dash? Hancock cut herself off with a gasp as she looked upon the giant pile of chests at the end of the cave in a huge cavern. Looking around, she could see the same marks that showed that Garp had carved this cavern out himself. Walking up to the closest chest, she opened it and her eyes widened. It was filled with berries. Checking other chests, it was the same story. Didn't matter the size of the chest, they were all filled to the brim with money. This is more than enough to fund the beginning of my reign as an emperor. These are several fortunes. Garp, seems I owe you once again. Hancock smiled widely as she grabbed a few of the chests and carried them back to the ship. Put these away in the hold and place guards on them. I'll be back with more. She spoke to her Kuja as she went back to collect more chests. Garp, after all, had told her she couldn't have her Kuja help her collect the treasure. With Alvia. Alvia sighed as her body ached from all of her work. Maintaining the sails and ensuring they were on the right path was difficult without the help of the engine, but it still needed time to cool off after the speeding across the comm belt. Tom had warned her that if she turned the engine back on after the speed blitz could cause it to explode. It had been hours since she had done the blitz, but the engine still felt hot to the touch. We may need to dock somewhere safe while we wait for it to cool down, she muttered to herself as she adjusted the set once more. Walking back over to the map and compass, she looked over it for a brief moment before altering course slightly for a nearby village. Beaching the ship jostled Bonnie from her nap. Are we there? No, we gotta take a break from traveling for a bit to let the engine cool off. This is Syrup Village. Alvia smiled at Bonnie and patted her head. Come on, let's see if we can't get a hot meal. They'd been stuck with preservatives and cold foods for their journey, even if it was short, and it could get tiring not having something warm to eat. For Alvia, it reminded her a lot of the food she had been forced to eat while imprisoned by Spandine. Bonnie smiled at her and they got off the ship and walked into town. Walking over to the restaurant, they entered and ordered their food. Sitting down, Alvia positioned herself to keep her eyes on the entire area. Thanks for the help, Usopp. One of the waiters thanked a young boy carrying a toolbox. No problem, gotta keep my skills sharp for when it's time to head out. Let me know if anything else breaks, Usopp said as he left. Place doesn't seem like it'll pose any danger, but I'll keep my hockey active just in case, Alvia thought to herself. The engine should be cooled enough once we get back to the ship later. I should inform Garp about that so he can head for here to collect me. I'd say we should get there tonight. Hopefully whoever Garp is having greet us will be there. With Dragon? Dragon looked at the massive pile of intel that had just been delivered by Kuma. So the base was still in use. How much have we gotten from it? He asked Ivankov. We only recently started on it. I put a group to work on it right away once it arrived. We know it was a base that they used to outfit the proper ships with cannons to be able to fire buster call ammunition. We were able to uncover a few other locations, and Betty has already directed the others to go after them. This may help us find the storage and production sites for the ammunition, so we're prioritizing them, Ivankov explained. Things are progressing rapidly, Dragon, and we're still recovering from rooting out all those traitors. Normally I would be concerned with how fast things are moving given our current state, but our allies with the Constellation crew and Hancock have allowed us to keep up with everything easily while we recover. What I'm worried about is how fast Kuma is sending us intel. Has he even slept? Dragon sighed. Ivankov shared his concerns. I agree, although I'm more worried about him ignoring any injuries. I've only seen him like this twice before, but never to such an extent as this. His memories of how Kuma was when Ginny was first kidnapped and when she escaped and contacted them. Kuma had ignored his needs during those times, his emotions a complete mess, but this was far different from anything Ivankov had seen of Kuma. He was something else entirely, something Ivankov recognized only because he had seen something similar in the past. Of parents becoming so angry that they became wild beasts. But those times paled to what he was seeing with Kuma. I'll talk to Dad about it, but Kuma didn't say anything about what he found there. We thought Lasky was there, but we have no confirmation or anything. It's the fact we haven't heard anything that makes me suspect that Lasky was there and Kuma interrogated him. Whatever he learned from that interrogation sent him after his next target immediately without proper communications. Dragon gripped his arms tightly. His rage could very well kill him if we don't find Bikori and Ginny's body soon. That night with Alvia. Alvia observed the setting sun as they neared the dock of Fusha village. Bonnie yawned and leaned against her as she fought to stay awake. We're here. If you want to go to sleep it's okay, I'll handle the introductions. Bonnie let out a whine. No, I want to meet him, she stubbornly refused. Alvia sighed and smiled at her, patting the young girl's head. Okay, fine. She pulled the ship to the dock and tied it to it. Picking Bonnie up she walked into town looking around. It appeared bigger than how Garp had originally described it. Maybe they got some new residents during the crisis. She finally saw the bar and walked up to it. Giving the doors a small knock she walked into the mostly empty bar, except for 3 people. The woman behind the bar seemed nice, but the 2 sitting at the bar were intimidating. Excuse me, I was told to find a monkey here. She spoke the code phrase Garp had told her to use and hoped she was right. The giant of a man got up from his seat and turned around, only to fall over and hit his head on one of the tables with a cup falling on his head. God damn it, Rosinante, how the hell do you keep pulling this crap? Dayton Whisper shouted at him. Makino giggled. It's fine, Dayton. You must be Alvia. I'm Makino. Is this Bonnie? Bonnie looked at Makino with bleary eyes. I'm Bonnie, it's nice to meet you. She slurred her words slightly. Makino stepped out from behind the bar and Alvia walked over to her, only for Ichiji to appear between them with crossed arms. Don't think you can approach Mom so easily. Alvia blinked owlishly at him and looked around, seeing the rest of his siblings. I'm sorry, Garp said his grandkids were here. He wanted me to make sure she met them. Are you his grandkids? The former Vin Smokes blushed. He considers us his grandkids? Niji asked tentatively. He mentioned how 4 of them like to stick to singular colors. He actually mentioned that there was new one, Drake? I'm sorry, he just kept going on about them and his words started blurring together. Alvia admitted to her embarrassment. She prided herself on being able to hear people's stories, but Garp was saying so much about his grandkids and talking so fast Alvia literally could not keep up. We only talked over a denden. Why would he consider me his grandkid? Drake asked as he peeked out from behind the bar. Get used to it, X, that's Gramps for you, Sabo said from the ceiling where he was sitting with Ace. How do you think Sabo got stuck with us? Ace said with a cheeky smirk. From higher up on the ceiling another child let out a loud laugh and fell down with his stretchy arms connecting him back to where he had come from. Hi, I'm Luffy. Gramps said you ate a devil fruit, show me, show me, show me. He bounced off the ground and looked at Bonnie with a wide smile. I'm sorry, we've had a pretty long journey and we're both pretty tired. She can't really show you right now, Alvia said with a sweat drop. Luffy pouted. Aw, fine. Hey Tereo, can you make another sculpture? Luffy requested of Law, who was checking on Rosinante. Later, I'd rather go to sleep. And I told you to stop calling me that. He snapped at Luffy. Luffy giggled. Nope, you're Tereo now. Law let out a growl of frustration and Yanji patted him comfortingly on the back. You know he won't stop, he's too stubborn for that. Reiju giggled. Luffy will need to go fishing soon for tomorrow's feast. Let them rest and you can have fun then. Luffy huffed. Okay. Rosinante gave Alvia a wide smile. It's nice to properly meet you, Alvia. Sorry about Luffy, he's very sociable. Honestly, Reiju is the only one who can really rein him in, but she more often just encourages him. As if to prove his words, Reiju showed Luffy a Molotov cocktail. Since Law's not being fun, let's go burn down a noble's house. Luffy gave her a wide smile and pulled her out of the bar before anyone could stop them, both kids laughing loudly. Dayton grunted in frustration. Damn it, Ace, why'd you have to teach her about arson? Don't look at me, I just taught them how to make a fire. Sabo's the anarchist who taught them arson. Ace immediately threw his brother under the ship. I regret nothing, Sabo sang out with a laugh. It was joined by Bonnie's tired laugh. You guys are weird. Alvia, on the other hand, had a feeling of dawning horror. By the tree of knowledge, you're all as insane as Garp, aren't you? Massive understatement, Dayton huffed. Next day's afternoon, with Bikori. Former king of Sorbet, Bikori wrung his hands as he paced around the hidden base of Black Knight Tempest Cap. The island had earned the name due to the perpetual storm that embroiled the island. The sole mountain of the island managed to peek out over the top the storm, which gave the appearance of a nightcap. The storm caused no natural light to break through, giving the appearance putting the island through an eternal night. Due to the storm, it wasn't possible for people to settle on the island, but it made it the perfect spot for a cipher pole base, requiring a cipher pole agent to guide ships to the base safely. The cause for Bikori's nervousness was the silent Den sitting on a nearby table. Since arriving here, he had been told that his reward would be delivered via Den message, but it had remained silent for the days since he had arrived. I hope nothing has happened. If I don't get my reward, I won't have anything protecting me from that savage Kuma. Since the Battle of Sorbet, Bikori's fear of Kuma had multiplied. Looking out the window of the room, he saw all the agents hard at work, organizing all the intel they sent out to their agents. The base operated as one of a few cipher pole bases that managed intel sent out to their agents to aid them on their missions. Normal or undercover, it didn't matter. The special thing about this base, however, is they exclusively managed delivering supplies to their agents. Given the island's natural defenses, they couldn't be successfully attacked. A blockade was also impossible due to the choppy waters. It would lead any stationary ships into the rocks and destroy them. To sneak in would require years of undercover work, and even then, to be able to get out, one would require a cipher pole agent to guide them out of the waters. What is taking so long? I have done my work. I am due my reward. Bikori hypocritically said, since he had people he had ordered do all the work. He felt somewhat safe given some of the high-ranking cipher pole agents that guarded the base. While they weren't members of CP9 or CP0, they were still well ranked within their respective cipher poles. The regular agents were also well armed. The base even had sea stone nets to use against devil fruit users. The head of the base was even granted a sea stone sword and a small case of sea stone bullets. The base was considered one of the most secure world government bases in the world, below Eni's Lobby, Marineford, and of course Marie Geos. Although that statement could not be considered properly accurate, as unlike the others, this base had not been attacked and thus its defenses had never been used beyond yearly drills. Bikori once again looked nervously at the Den as he heard it begin to ring. Rushing over, he picked up the incoming call and then kneeled before it. Elder Saint Saturn, it is my utmost pleasure to hear from you. Bikori, you have done well. You followed instructions well, ensured the safety of my property. You have earned your reward in service to me. I now name you Saint Bikori, a new celestial dragon. Stand proud, for you are now a god, Saturn declared before hanging up. Bikori stood up and smiled widely. His lifelong goal was finally realized. He was a celestial dragon. Now Kuma will never be able to touch me. I am free to do as I please. Bikori began to laugh madly, assured of his continued living. Only for a giant bear to crash into the base. Bikori ran out of the room and looked down, watching as the many filing cabinets disappeared with a swipe of the beast's paws, the agents attacking it crushed beneath its might. The nets were repelled, destroyed, the base's commander killed by his own bullets. All the defenses that Bikori had believed would keep him safe, that the world government believed would keep the base safe, fell apart beneath this great bear's rampage. Then it looked at Bikori directly. Bikori. Bikori, however, did not run. You can't do anything to me, beast. I am now a celestial dragon. I have ascended to godhood, I now command the world. The beast clearly feared his words, at least that's how it appeared to Bikori. Instead, it jumped up and grabbed him from where he stood and slammed him into the ground. Where did you send her? Where did you send Ginny's body? Bikori screamed out, You can't touch me. I am a saint. That title means nothing, you will answer me. The beast growled in his face. It shined like many stars in the night sky, it was almost blinding. Where did you send Ginny's body? What did you do with her? Bikori was shaking, and at the end of the day he was a coward over anything else. To Saint Roseward. I sent it to my fellow saint. Calling Ginny, and it pissed off the beast even more. Where? The bear roared in his face. It grabbed him with its paw and stood at his full height, and Bikori could finally see that the bear was Kuma. He grew even more afraid and struggled within his hold. Where is Saint Roseward? I don't know. I was to his vacation home. Please, let me live. I'll serve you, I'll tell you everything I know. Where is the vacation home? Bikori shook like a leaf in the wind, the rain of the storm pelting down on him and Kuma, yet only he was the one who shook. Roanoke. It's at Roanoke, please let me live. No. Kuma pressed his pads onto Bikori, but before he could be launched away he trapped the former king in between both of his hands. The contrasting forces, a movement he would normally use for his Ursus shock attack. Bikori's flesh rippled and tore beneath the force. I am God. The Ursus shock exploded, turning him into a complete mist as it destroyed the island. The storm that had raged since the island was discovered dissipated. Bikori's moment of death, the pain he felt, it was so great he didn't know how to describe it. The world to him lost all color. Looking around he could still feel the pain, but his body was fine, but it glowed a strange blue. See? What did I tell you? It's Callisto. Kuma is Callisto's reincarnation. Death yelled excitedly, ignoring Bikori's screams. Sky looked at the frozen state of Kuma in shock. I can't believe it. We weren't able to recover her soul when she died. We weren't able to enter it into the reincarnation cycle. How is this possible? I don't know, we can figure it out later, but think about what this means. Death said as she walked over to where Bikori was trapped in his pain. If Callisto's soul entered into reincarnation, that means the souls of others lost in the war could be in the cycle as well. But that could mean our enemies are in the cycle as well, such as Zeus and Odin, Sky pointed out. Looking around he shivered slightly. The colorlessness of your eternity always creeps me out. Can we go back so we can tell the others about this? Yeah, sure. Death touched Bikori's soul and the frozen colorless world around them disappeared. For a brief moment they were visible to Kuma before they vanished from sight. Kuma, however, never noticed the two. Panting from the rage, he felt his emotions were overwhelming him. He now knew where Ginny was. He wanted to go there right away and save her. But he forced himself to remain still. He pulled out his denden and called Garp. Hey, good to finally hear from you. We just picked up Alvia. You need your next target? I found Bikori. He said Ginny is at Roseward's vacation home on Roanoke, Kuma said as he prepared to send himself off. Always knew the people there didn't just disappear. We'll meet up where the army is stationed and plan our attack. We'll be going after them in the coming week. Get yourself checked on, get some sleep, eat, and be ready. See you soon, Kuma. And Alvia said that Bonnie took well to the others at Fusha village. She's safe and seems happy. So you don't have to worry about her now, Garp assured Kuma. Kuma smiled for the first time since he started this attack against the Marines. Thank you, Garp. He launched himself for Dragon, ready to rescue Ginny. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Support the writer. Don't forget to like, sub, share, and donate for more videos.